Social work always was a damned interesting, good profession. My name is Evelyn Adler Zysman, Zysman, and we are in Omaha, Nebraska, in the house at 5005 Davenport Street, where I have lived practically all my adult years. Actually, I was born in South Omaha, and when I was born, we were living apparently in South Omaha. And don't forget, I'm the last of the 7 girls. Uh, and one of the neighbors came over to South Omaha. One of the neighbors came over to my mother and said to her very nicely, Mrs. Adler, don't feel badly, but you know, we have never had Jews in this neighborhood before. And Mama said to her, this famous story in our family, Mama said to her, don't worry, they'll know us, they'll like us. And they did. In those days, kids, of course, there were not only separations of whites and blacks, but of Jews and Gentiles and so forth. That whole neighborhood has changed. Should I tell these stories?
Sure.
This is fascinating because my incredible mother from the old country would look at us and say, don't you look at your sister, you be yourself. And we called them Mama and Papa. Papa, you know where the French Cafe now is? Right there was Adler and Levinson fruits and vegetables. And the farmers would come in and bring them their fruits and vegetables, and then the grocers would come in and buy them from Papa. And Papa, Adler and Levinson, yep. Papa was known nationally in those days, in some places, because he was a scholar in the Talmud and the Torah. And Mama knew nothing. She couldn't even read or write English, but she knew them and revered education. Kids, you have no idea. Her kids were going to be educated. When did I really become interested in social work? We always grew up knowing, being informed that there were people who needed help. We grew up, we were very fortunate to have parents who felt discrimination was wrong. It was out of the question. What for? My mother and my father both felt strongly that people are people. And we grew up that way. And I remember that my mother always felt strongly that you should not be discriminating against anybody because it could happen to you. And I always knew that there were things people didn't have that they were entitled to. And I used to put it that way, really. People. It's that simple. That simple. There were people who needed help, and if you could do something, it would be interesting to be working with people. It was that way. It was always that way. In our whole family, honey, see. And in college, of course, sociology department became my field. And, oh God. I had always had teachers who were wonderful to me. And this was the head of the sociology department. And she let me grade papers. I was her assistant. And the guys in the football teams were so damn good to me because I was reading their papers and grading them, you know. Honey, you're my God. Until I went to college, I had never been out of Omaha, Nebraska. Seriously. And then when I went to college, then I began to travel. And, and then when I traveled to New York, I so remember walking through the neighborhoods on the Lower East Side. Oh, God. And what I remember also about my days in social work was walking through the neighborhoods, and the boys used to whistle, you know. It was wonderful. At that time, the International Garment Workers Union of New York City were on strike. Those were terrible times for workers. And so I was doing my master's thesis on this whole situation of low-paid workers in this field. And I went down to their office and would sit, and they would come and tell me stories that were unbelievable. And you know what I remember, kids? In New York, picketing someplace, and this guy, an old Jewish guy, comes over beating on me for picketing. Yeah. These were my introduction to the field of social work. And he was it must have been a Jewish agency, and he was an old Jewish guy beating up on me. He had no right to do that. Well, then I must have been 21 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt ran for president. And I remember clearly, and I love it to remember it, when it came to vote, and I walked out of that voting booth, having voted, and I said out loud, I threw my arms out and said, I have just elected the next president of the United States. I was so impressed with it. My interest in politics always was. And I think it is more important today than it ever was. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I was working with a foster care agency, and this kid was 6 years old, I think, and he was in this home place in Queens, a very nice house and a very nice family, supposedly. So anyhow, when I went in, the kid, she had the kid by her. I can close my eyes and see it. And she said to me, this is so-and-so, and would you like to, he said to him, would you like to see where he lives in our house? And I said, of course I would. And so she and he took me to a nice room with a nice bed in it and so forth, and this is where he lives in our house. And the phone rang, or the doorbell, I don't know which, but she had to run out. She excused herself. And so the kid said to me when she's out, would you like to see where I sleep? So I said, I'd love to, honey. He takes us to the head of the basement stairs. I close my eyes and see it. No light up there. And we walk down the basement stairs, turn on the light at the bottom, and there is a cot. It was a cot. It was it was a decent cot. But there was at the bottom of these stairs in the basement. He held out his hand and he said to me, a bee could sting me and I wouldn't cry. And that kid is saying to me that life is beating the hell out of me, and I'm taking it. But I will never forget that. The importance of child welfare is if you want your children to grow up in as decent people and knowing the world around them, you better know about child welfare and what's going on in the field today. And the importance of kids having opportunities. All of our kids have to have a chance. And what is going to happen with these kids to find jobs and what is going to happen with them? You don't have to go to college, honey. You can go through high school as long as you know enough to get a job and hold it. And as long as you know enough to take care of your family, do it.
How do you feel about social work today?
There are people who are dedicated and who deserve all kinds of help and credit for literally giving their lives to help other people. Now, again, like everything else, it becomes a way of making a living for other people, but an interesting way of making a living. It became a profession.
What became a profession?
Being a social worker. It became a profession. And whether you're a social worker, whether you're a lawyer, or whether you're whatever, you should know what you're doing, where you're doing it. Knowing what you're doing. If you're helping people, for God's sake, know what you're doing for them.
When Edith Abbott was helping to start the social work education field, She said, we are preparing you for the grave responsibility of interfering with the lives of others.
Wait a minute, I remember that. See, you're helping me remember her. Oh my God, yes. Oh my God. Oh, honey. Oh God, this is wonderful. Grace Abbott. Isn't that wonderful? I am trying to remember Edith Abbott, trying to remember, because there was a famous person at that time. It must have been Edith Abbott. See, I remember, I took them for granted. And they were wonderful teachers and were wonderful to me. But where did she teach? In Chicago or in Chicago? She was in Chicago. On the side of Chicago, that poverty side, where she literally started organizations and helped for, honey, she did to help people more than you can imagine. Because in those days, don't forget, honey, there were not so many agencies running around helping you. And it wasn't Edith I remember as much as Grace. Isn't that interesting? That was in our lifetime. And we've still got a ways to go. Yes, we do. Yes, we do.